what has Twitter become under Elon Musk? We've seen a lot more anti-Semitism and racism and misogyny and transphobia. Musk is courting these people, insisting that he's doing it in the name of free speech. Even if he is, this stuff is out there a lot more. It makes, I mean, I am a reporter that deals in misinformation. I scour Truth Social and Gab. I'm on these sites. And Twitter makes me uncomfortable. Imagine if I were an advertiser trying to reach families and kids. That's going to make someone 100% more uncomfortable than I am. I deal with this stuff as a living. An advertiser doesn't want to be anywhere near this.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, September 8th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in Silicon Valley. My name is Mike Malone. I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove. And our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. So, Scott, we got a lot to cover this week. Things are hopping. Okay, first of all, some early information is leaked out about the Apple iPhone 15, which is coming out next week. Are you going to be there for the announcement?
Yes, it will be Tuesday the 12th. So maybe by the time you're hearing this, we'll have some information, but we'll also get it to you next week. But yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, okay. So they're going to introduce the iPhone 15 in a Pro and a Pro Max model, right? And there's some rumors there's been production difficulties with the Pro Max, apparently having to do with sensors on the camera. And I guess that's one of the features that is going to be headlined with this introduction is the new cameras on the iPhone. Have you heard that? And do you know any details about that?
No details. You know, the rumors rarely have details. I think that's why they're just rumors. But it is time for a camera upgrade. We often see that in these iterations. And really, you know, we've talked about this before. It's hard to tell a lot of these phones apart as they come out year by year. And really, you know, the big battle right now, I think, between, say, Apple and all the Android guys, but largely Samsung, is, you know, the camera, how good it is, and the screen quality. And it kind of goes back and forth. There are some who swear by each one. But we are, if not at peak cell phone, we are at very, very gradually incremental cell phone.
Well, there's another peak with this cell phone we'll talk about in a minute. Apparently, it's got, from what I can understand, it's going to come in a very rich blue color you can get. That's their color hook this time around. It's brushed metal. It's titanium, which is also creating some manufacturing challenges. Even thinner. The batteries, there was talk that battery would be more powerful, but apparently Apple's claiming that 3-nanometer chip it has in there is so cool and efficient that they can keep the existing battery power. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's hard to say. I mean, I must say, for cell phones, you know, day by day, and I'm one who puts his cell phone through a lot of paces for my job. The battery holds up fairly well, but you still have to charge it at the end of a day. So I don't know that we've got incremental battery moves that would make a big difference. You'd have to have a big move to make it last for 2 or 3 days, given the kind of use that we all put our phones through these days. And that's really, really heavy use every day.
Well, with that new chip, apparently it's going to be a lot faster and have more features in time with the apps, because it's just an incredible chip, apparently, given its size. Packaging, yeah, a little bit smaller. And I guess the display is going to be about the same size glass. Is this a major jump, would you say? I'm asking you this because you mentioned peak iPhone. Apple's going to test peak price for an iPhone. Apparently, according to the New York Times, it's going to be $100 more. With all these features, or as few of these features, worth $100 more, given the current price, given the current economy?
Right. And that's something that Apple has had to deal with for a few cycles now. not a bad economy, but an uncertain economy, certainly, no doubt. And one thing I do when these things come out and I'm asked to be on podcasts or radio shows or even our own newscast is to point out that, yeah, Apple is raising the price pretty much each time it comes out, especially on those high-end Pro Max phones. They get really expensive. On the other hand, the careful shopper can find previous iterations of iPhones that are still on the market, and those prices often come down. So if you've wanted a 13 or a 14 or a 12 or something like that, you can get one, and it's still a great phone. And maybe there's one or two small things in the current iteration it doesn't have, but another thing it doesn't have is a jacked up price, because frequently the prices go down. And as someone who has taken advantage of that myself, it just feels like the smart shopper.
Regular viewers know that's your policy.
Right. Well, right. Look,
I'm sure on these interviews that the interviewers are real pleased to hear you promoting prior obsolete models.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know the Apple PR people really well, and they're like, hey, it's great. They all want to talk to you about the phone. Why do you keep talking about the cheaper model? But look, that's part of it. And I think that's part of Apple's success story is if you have, hypothetically, teenagers, let's say hypothetically, and you're not sure that that $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 phone is a good idea, you can find one for $600 that's just fine, doesn't break your budget. And again, for you, you save a little money and you can text your kid and all that stuff. For Apple, it gets someone into the ecosystem that eventually, a few, maybe college degrees and jobs later, they'll be able to purchase a phone for $1,400 if they choose. And so I think it's a really smart move by Apple, and it's a smart move by shoppers to say, okay, the 15 is out, look how much it costs. But look at the last few iterations. They're still in stores, and they're a lot less expensive.
Remember when Apple used to sue everybody for leaking? And now leaking seems to be part of their marketing process. They're not stopping various publications and researchers and reporters from leaking this stuff out. Why the change?
Yeah, I don't know that they'd call it leaking. They'd probably call it previewing or whatever. Yeah. But yes, it's the lockdown 100% secrecy that they were known for is almost, let's be honest, an impossibility these days.
That's true. We got to admit. Okay, we have bigger things to talk about, but I want to get this one out of the way. WeWork, good old WeWork, the back from the dead like Lazarus, has told its landlords this week that it will try to renegotiate nearly all of its leases. It still seems to believe that it's coming back from the dead and it's going to be a player once again. Obviously there's a lot of empty office buildings out there, and especially in San Francisco, but really, I mean, I think you could probably go to a retailer, a storefront in San Francisco on Market Street and get the landlord to pay you to move in. So I'm not sure how this business model works in the non-go-go years of, the early part of this century. Moreover, they kind of set a historic moment. They did a reverse stock split, 40-1, trying to stay over $1 so they could stay on the New York Stock Exchange. And here's the unique part. Typically, when you do a reverse stock split, the stock price goes up a little bit on the individual shares. It actually went down almost 20%. So a reverse stock split that lost the money. That's got to be unique.
I don't know that it's unique. I think what they've done is simply lost confidence completely. I mean, the world got hip to WeWork, and I don't just mean the Adam Neumann stuff about WeWork. I mean, just the basic business model. The world got hip to that. And if you look at the go-go days when this company was worth something like, I don't know, $70 billion in valuation, even then, real estate people in New York were like, this will never work. This is a terrible model that's overinflated. Now, all these years later, as the market value stands at, 182 million, that's an incredible, incredible fall. And, the stock price is decimated. And I think it's simply people realize this is a model that just won't work, no matter how much they try to fix it or work with people or massage, whatever it is. It's just something that people were hip to from the beginning that is not a good idea. The fact is, unlike most really bad ideas, this one, for some reason, has really stretched out its lifeline longer than most. But there are plenty of people who knew from the beginning this just didn't make sense.
It's just amazing they're still around. I mean, you find yourself chuckling when you say the word WeWork because of all the images that are freighted with the kids, startup teams being locked out of offices because they don't understand the doors. All the stuff that came with that. A world that seems very far away now, on the far side of COVID, that it's kind of hard to remember, but it's amusing. And WeWork is one of the classic examples of the excesses of that era.
Yeah, I agree. And having read at least 2, maybe 3 books on the phenomenon, I would say it's just a fascinating business study. And I must also give a shout out to the, I can't remember which streaming service it was on that did the WeWork. I think it was called We Crashed with Anne Hathaway, Jared Leto. It was really, really well done. And they didn't spare any punches. And it just, they're going to teach this in business school for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Stock market sliding this week because of fears about the economy and inflation and all that. But the big thing right now, well, first of all, we got a bunch of IPOs queuing up to go public. A lot of companies. Meanwhile, we have the UAW strike, which it seems like it's going to happen now. They seem to be at loggerheads, and it may last for a few months. Now, it's being called a nightmare scenario for Detroit, obviously for the automakers. But what about for the electronics companies? I mean, I kept thinking about ARM, which is going to go public very soon at an enormous valuation. I think it's $52 billion. Is this going to impact the IPOs of tech companies, along with all the other semiconductors that are selling to the auto industry of all those assembly lines shut down?
It's a very fair question because remember how dependent auto companies have become on chip companies and electronics companies. And it's interesting, if there was a car strike, you'd look to, in years past, all of those who made car parts, right? And, they're really going to struggle. But now it would be electronics. And right. I don't know the exposure that ARM has in particular. ARM, by the way, just earlier, a few hours before you and I sit here speaking, cut a long-term deal with Apple. That's really, really going to help their IPO tremendously. Yeah. Those bankers just, are licking their chops right now. As far as overall, though, you're right. I mean, look at every car company now. It's not just Tesla that's relying on these electronic components. And I wonder if, much like people have been saying, Netflix, a tech company, becomes the big winner in a Hollywood strike, you wonder if Tesla, which is largely a tech company, becomes the big winner in an auto strike if that happens. But really, the consumers are the big losers because both EVs, but just cars in general, we want to see more. We want to see choices. We want to see the prices come down. And if there's a big major strike, I think it hurts all of us.
Well, I mean, think of the irony of this. A few months ago, the automakers were saying we can't get enough chips. And now the chip makers are saying we're not going to be able to get enough cars to sell to. I mean, what a topsy-turvy year for automotive electronics.
It is a symbiotic relationship to make this economy work, and everything has to be firing in order for it to do so. Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about Elon Musk and the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. This is a wacky story. I mean, you get used to wacky stories with Elon, and I guess we're going to learn a lot more when Walter Isaacson's book comes out pretty soon. But Elon is threatening to sue the ADL for restraint of trade because he claims its attempts to stop advertisers from advertising on Twitter X has cost 60% of their advertising of X's advertising revenues. What is he doing? I mean, now there's a stop ADL uh, handle on X, and the ADL is going, we'll sue you back. I mean, first of all, is this real? I mean, it seems almost, I hate to say it, but it's like the old lie, coming back, that Elon's saying, well, they're calling me an anti-Semite and, et cetera, et cetera. What's going on here?
I mean, there's a lot going on here, and none of it is particularly new if you know your history. I mean, this is a business owner who's losing money. And let's just cut to the chase. He's blaming the Jews, right? He's saying, oh, I'm losing money. I'm not going to admit responsibility. I'm going to blame the Jews. Now, what is going on?
That was my first reaction when I read this. It's like, oh, we're back to the old game. Good Lord, the oldest crime of them all,
And I mean, what does the ADL do as its reason for being? It points out anti-Semitism and racism. What has Twitter become under Elon Musk? We've seen a lot more anti-Semitism and racism, and misogyny and transphobia. Musk is courting these people, insisting that he's doing it in the name of free speech. Even if he is, this stuff is out there a lot more. It makes, I mean, I am a reporter that deals in misinformation. I scour Truth Social and Gab. I'm on these sites, and Twitter makes me uncomfortable. Imagine if I were an advertiser trying to reach families and kids. That's going to make someone 100% more uncomfortable than I am. I deal with this stuff as a living. An advertiser doesn't want to be anywhere near this. So the advertisers are looking at what Twitter is becoming, and they're backing away, understandably. And
okay, so Musk seems to be claiming that it's been a systematic effort by the ADL to paint him personally as an anti-Semite. First of all, has there been any kind of campaign, and is there any evidence that Elon is anti-Semitic?
I mean, first, has there been a campaign? Not that I've seen, and I must admit, I'm not tracking the ADL's Twitter handle, as far as following them or anything. All of a sudden, they're in the spotlight, and listening to them is in this back and forth. But really, what the ADL does is not, try to paint Elon Musk as an anti-Semite, but to point out anti-Semitism on the rise in places like Twitter or social media in general. There are all sorts of sites that do this for, the purpose of saying, hey, be careful, there's racism here, or there's transphobia here, or there's misogyny here. And as someone who doesn't want those things in my life, I'm glad that those organizations exist. Musk, by the way, in April of this year, just a few months ago, said, hey, we're really near break even. The advertisers are coming back. Now he says, well, the advertisers, it turns out, were gone all this time. So apparently he lied to us about that. Why are they going away? Well, he says it's not because of the transphobia and anti-Semitism and racism on his site. It's because the ADL is telling them not to come on. This doesn't make sense. And it's got to be, one of the weird things about all this is it's Musk putting all this out, not the woman literally famous for courting advertisers that he just hired as CEO. She's been silent through this. And so it doesn't make sense. And look, Kanye West put out an album a while ago. This is the biggest rapper of our day.
Right.
As part of his publicity tour, he made the statement that slavery was a choice made by Black people.
Right.
His album tanked. You can't go out there and say statements like that. They're horribly offensive.
And he lost the Nike deal and everything else.
Right. And what did he do? He blamed the Jews. And I remember asking Jewish people about that and said, wow, Kanye's blaming the Jews. Are you still going to be his fan? And they said, oh, I didn't even make it that far. When he starts telling people that slavery was a choice, I'm out. So he's losing people by the ton, and he's blaming the Jews. Again, what, 1.5% of the population? It's the easiest mark in the book. And Musk, disappointingly, is not pointing to, hey, business things or my own failings. It's, well, there's this group out there. You know them. They're the reason we're losing money. a lawsuit would be, I think, terrible for him. Any discovery out there is going to be embarrassing. I don't see this going that far.
He's trying to wave the ADL off so they don't say anything about X, just sort of like I've seen organizations take on the Southern Poverty Law Center in the same way, saying, no, you can't put us on a list, of your questionable companies. I mean, is that what he's trying to do? He's just trying, is he bluffing? Will there never be a lawsuit? Is this just get big and wave your arms and scare people off?
I mean, look, this month, I'm telling you, I really doubt that there'll be a lawsuit against the ADL. Last month, you may remember, I was telling you, I really doubt there's going to be a cage match with Mark Zuckerberg. This is starting to feel familiar and embarrassing. And what are you going to do but not take it terribly seriously? I mean, I take the hate speech online seriously, but I don't take a feud that he's seeming to try to distract us with seriously. I just can't.
So what are the odds, you think, of this hotshot marketing VP, essentially the COO, is going to stick around having to deal with all of this?
You mean Linda Yaccarino, the CEO of X? I don't know. I mean, I think this is an opportunity for her to shine. I think it's an opportunity for her to bring advertisers back. It's an opportunity for her to grow a struggling app into something much larger and to prove
she's throwing a monkey wrench into every one of her initiatives.
I was going to say all those opportunities depend on one thing, and that's not her talent and it's not her contacts. We know those are there. The one thing is Musk getting out of the way, and I don't know if he's going to do that.
Well, reading the selection, the serialization on Isaacson's book on Elon, apparently he does have that squirrel syndrome where he gets a little bored and finds something else to distract him. So maybe, he's reaching the end of his X run and he'll find something else to build up and destroy.
Possibly. I mean, it would be, we just talked about WeWork burning all that money. I mean, he did spend $44 billion on this site. I really don't know that he's going to give it up that easily, but you're right. It's distraction after distraction.
Well, he's just shown he has a way to get capital, which is he can borrow money from SpaceX. He just took $1 billion out of there. I mean, he's his own bank now. So he's almost becoming impregnable when you think about it. He shut his mouth off enough. He's got enough sources of cash. How do you stop him?
I mean, look, you and I have covered a million CEOs in Silicon Valley through the years. Can you imagine any of them surviving? I mean, calling someone a pedophile. Can you imagine any of them surviving, the sexual harassment charges against them? Can you imagine anyone surviving this dust up with the ADL or this embarrassment of a cage match? There is something, I think, too big to fail of the richest person and the person who actually owns Twitter, literally owning the megaphone.
Yeah. Well, as always, we'll see what he comes up with next. Yes, real quick, next Tuesday begins, about the time the iPhone is getting introduced, the first antitrust trial, the first modern monopoly trial in the internet era begins between the United States and Google over the monopoly power of its search engine. It's supposed to last 10 weeks, and the Justice Department has spent 3 years getting ready for it. What do you think? I mean, this is kind of a landmark event. I don't know why they didn't, if they were going to do this, I don't know why nobody went after Google in 2010 instead of 2023, when, I mean, there actually are challenges to Google now. In 2023, Google not only was unchallenged, it was taking down the U.S. publishing industry, sector by sector, by stealing its advertising. That was monopolistic behavior. But still, does the U.S. government have a case right now against Google?
It may. I think it's going to be a difficult one. I think part of the reason this hasn't happened is political. I mean, Elizabeth Warren didn't win. She would have taken that on, I think, pretty quickly. And now there's a younger FTC. There is a more eager political body on Capitol Hill to fight antitrust. And so I think you're going to hear rumblings of not just monopoly in the search engine, but hey, how do we break this up? For example, search engine on your, on one device is owned by Google. YouTube controls the video search. Are we going to hear calls to break that up? Let me tell you, next Tuesday is going to be a really, really big day for big tech. You've got the biggest. You've got Apple coming out with its new phone, a category it really strongly, nearly dominates. You've got Salesforce kicking off Dreamforce. You got one of the big software companies of our time literally shutting down the streets of San Francisco to show off its power, bringing tens of thousands of people in from all over the world. And Google, the biggest in search, going on trial. This is going to be a fascinating week coming up. And all these things take time.
I think it's good to Google trials in D.C. and not on the peninsula or something, because you would be running. Are they giving you the entire 6 o'clock news just to cover stories? And you're going to be running all over the place in that van.
Yeah. So the plan is to do Apple and, Benioff's keynote is the same time as Tim Cook's keynote. So no quantum physics. I won't be in two places at the same time. But I understand the Salesforce Dreamforce story is more look at San Francisco trying to come back, right? And they need that. And it's not so much the latest CRM software, because that doesn't affect, I don't know, especially our viewers all that much, but a new iPhone does. But just the idea that you have both this tech powerhouse introducing the latest gazillion-dollar product, and then you have a company and a man who is really working to try to keep San Francisco relevant. Right. I think that's going to be a fascinating day.
Okay, and finally, education blogger Joanne Jacobs, who I used to work with at the Mercury News. In her blog, the headline is perfect. It says, "Let AI do it. High schoolers don't need to write essays anymore." And she quotes, "Goodbye and good riddance," wrote an educator, a school teacher named Daniel Herman in The Atlantic, saying he's shifting his focus entirely from writing to reading. My first reaction to that was, yeah, goodbye critical thinking. I mean, you don't write essays? I mean, luckily I'm at the end of a career of writing essays, so I'm not feeling threatened these days. Actually, I should feel pretty excited, because there would be no competition from any young adult in the next 20 years. Schools have been systematically taking away mathematics, so you don't have calculus now in high school, even for the brightest kids, taking away essay writing. And the explanation is, well, with AI, we won't need to know how to write essays. It'll write essays for us. You're just old enough. I think you were probably in elementary school when they said, no need to teach arithmetic because kids will all have calculators with them. Well, the world turned out a little bit differently. And the whole point of those things, as she notes, is critical thinking. That's the whole point. And if we're backing away from it, and AI, I don't know how much experience you have with it, but I'm starting to hear horror stories about what AI produces. Aren't you glad? But my question really was, aren't you glad your kids are out of high school and in college?
Yeah, look, I think AI is something to watch. There's no mystery there. You and I have talked a lot about this. I've done a lot of stories on it. But here's the thing about critical thinking. It's not going to be taken over, I think, by machines. Now, obviously, I'm biased. Look, I've made an entire career, as you have, of writing. That's what I do. I mean, I speak to high schools, I speak to colleges, and they're like, oh, you're the guy on TV. What do you do? But I tell them for a living, I write. And I get paid to write. And that's my skill. It's my pride. It's super important to me. So I'm biased. But I also cover the tech industry, and I have seen literally trillions of dollars lost because the people at the top that discover these companies are good at engineering, and they're good at discovering things and launching things. But in getting the word out to the public, that's where you need people that can write and do creative thinking. And when they don't hire those people, the company fails, and brilliant ideas, billion-dollar ideas, are lost all the time in Silicon Valley because of that. I don't know if it's a middle person, call it a PR person, whatever it is, that needs to take that vision and bring it to the masses. And if you can't do that, you're not going to sell the next iPhone or the next whatever it is. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So whenever I hear that colleges are cutting back on creative writing or those kind of things in favor of engineering, like, great, we need more engineers. That's great. But boy, do we also need writers and creative thinkers, or else the engineers are going to be on their own trying to explain whatever it is they're talking about. We really do need a mix of these two fields.
I will leave it at that. I couldn't have said it better. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify. We should talk about Spotify next time. Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.